So we'll go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. And we thank you so much for joining us today for this really important webinar. My name is Andre Ward, and I'm joined by my dear colleague, none other than.
Hi, my name is Sheena Dumay. I'm the ATI/Family Services Program Assistant here at the Fortune Society.
And again, I'm Andre Ward. I'm the Associate Vice President of the David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy here at the Fortune Society. And we welcome all of you to this extremely important webinar. This webinar, in fact, is sponsored by the Fortune Society's David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy's Policy Center Collective, a really rich and powerful collaborative and group of leaders who are within Fortune. And this collective is filled with staff leaders who represent various areas of the agency. The leaders in the Policy Center Collective support advocacy initiatives for the benefit of justice impacting individuals outside of their regular individual and respective job duties. And each year, the Policy Center Collective leaders worked on various projects and mission, including today's event. Sheena?
A recorded version of this webinar will be available on Fortune Society website and YouTube. Please make sure you subscribe and follow our social media accounts.
Please make sure you follow us. We look forward to you supporting all of the amazing work that Fortune is doing, and your participation in this webinar in and of itself is support for our work in really amplifying the needs of the people that we serve. So let's get right to it, right? Today, right? When we think about this webinar, we think about technology. And technology is essential to modern life, now more than ever. And the reliance on technology has only increased as we navigate society during the pandemic. Government research shows that people behind bars are among the most digitally excluded in society. I'll say that again. Government research shows that people behind bars are among the most digitally excluded in society. Too many people leave incarceration ill-prepared to navigate a digital world. And upon their release, they can search to find organizations that offer technology training to help with their digital transition and advanced technology training. However, this process really takes time and requires patience. It requires, especially considering people coming home, focus on employment. Sheena?
Finding these services can be even more difficult outside of the communities like New York City. Offering digital literacy and advanced technology training while behind bars can help returning citizens with their transition, position them for success, and support their goals in seeking sustainability, permanent employment. During today's panel, we will navigate the current technology landscape in correctional facilities and discuss expansion opportunities, looking at innovative programs already in practice that seeks to narrow the knowledge in the gap.
Aren't you excited, Sheena?
Yes, I am.
I'm really excited too, right? Especially because of those that we have as panelists today. And our speakers include Dr. Ronald from the Fortune Society, Leah Faria, who is part of the Women's Community Justice Association, Sydney Heller from The Last Mile, Jason Jones, who's also from The Last Mile, and finally, Aedan Macdonald, who's the Justice Through Code Center for Justice at Columbia University. And so I'm going to read their bios really quickly before we get actually started into our questions. But again, Sheena, I'm really excited, as I'm sure you are. We've been planning this for a while. The Policy Center Collective leadership has been planning this to the detail, and we want to really acknowledge them for their leadership in all of this. But the bios read briefly. Dr. Ronald F. Day is the Vice President of Programs and Research at the Fortune Society. He's passionate about reentry, promoting desistance, dismantling mass incarceration, and addressing the stigma of incarceration. Dr. Day provides oversight for Fortune's education and employment services and for Individualized Correction Achievement Network, which is called ICAM, which is a New York City Department of Correction initiative that provides pre- and post-release services to people incarcerated in New York City jails. Ronald has been recipient of several awards, including the Citizens Against Recidivism Bridge Builder Award and the Justice Research Fellowship. Sheena, I don't know if you want to read Sydney's bio, but I certainly know that Sydney is also relevant and important to this panel. Sheena?
Okay. Sydney Heller started his career as a full stack web developer in the public sector in 2012. Sid is passionate about acquisition, of both spoken and coding languages. Sid first learned about in-prison programs after volunteering with a prison education project in the greater Los Angeles area. Sid's first position at the Last Mile involved working with web developers at the TLM Works Development Shop. Sid then transitioned into an administrative role outside the classroom environment and currently serves as a TLM executive director. Sid continually draws on his experience as a language learner, self-taught web developer, and day-to-day work with TLM student in the facility staff to inform his decisions regarding the TLM program, platform, and vision.
Absolutely. And I'll take Jason while I know you'll take Leah, Sheena. But Jason is a full-time disruptor, activist, educator, and software engineer. Jason Jones leads the Last Mile's conversations with existing and potential partners from TLM's future, with the focus on creating mutually beneficial partnerships that impact TML's learners on a high scale. And on September 25th of 2018, Jason was released after 13 and a half years incarcerated, during which time he graduated from the Last Mile's inaugural coding class. 3 weeks before his release, Jason became the first person from his cohort to sign a work agreement with the tech company as a software engineer. Jason was also the first justice-involved person to be accepted into the Lightspeed Fellowship with a team from Stanford. Outside of his work with TML, he runs his own tech consulting company called Disrupt2 Innovate LLC D2I, where he consults companies on integrating NVM and technology to amplify their impact.
Leah is a Black, formerly incarcerated community organizer and mother. She is a survivor of domestic and state violence. Leah uses her direct experiences as a way to build community and to organize Black and Brown women as the organizer at the Women's Community Justice Association. She is an instrumental leader of the Justice for Women Task, where she works to amplify the voices and empower women incarcerated at Rikers Island.
And lastly, Aedan Macdonald is compassionately devoted to extending the opportunities that a Colombian education provided to him after returning home from spending 4 years incarcerated in federal prison in California for marijuana distribution. Aedan Macdonald conceptualized and developed Justice Through Code, JTC, at Columbia University, a free 4-month full-stack web development and professional skills intensive taught at Columbia that provides a pathway to high-wage employment in the tech sector. JTC claims that poverty contributes to incarceration by providing life-changing access to education opportunities and networks necessary to enter into careers in the tech industry. JTC is a collaborative partnership between the Center for Justice at Columbia University and the Tamer Center for Social Enterprise at Columbia Business School. Just a really rich and powerful panel. Is that right, Shima?
Yes, absolutely.
And so we're going to get right into the questions, because I know that our audience has been waiting patiently for this conversation about addressing what we know and what is called, obviously, the digital divide. But equally as important, really understanding how important it is for the people that are impacted by the criminal legal system to access technology. Hence the reason why this specific title of this webinar is Bridging the Digital Divide, Behind the Bars, Beyond Release. So we'll jump into our first question. And I'll start off with asking Leah a question. Leah, thank you for joining us today. First, can you tell us a little bit more about your organization?
WCJA, better known as Women's Community Justice Association. We are a nonprofit organization that focuses on improving the lives of women and gender expansive people impacted by mass incarceration. We focus on creating change through policy advocacy, through community organizing and service. We also lead the hashtag Beyond Rosies campaign, where we are campaigning to permanently close the Rothenberg Center on Rikers Island, which is the female facility, to decarcerate the population at Roses to below 100 and to secure a standalone site for the women, particularly in Harlem, either Lincoln Correctional Facility or in Chelsea, Bayview Correctional Facility. So we are definitely on the ground. We getting the work done for the women and the gender expansive population.
Thank you for that, Leah. And I'll turn it to Sheena now for a question for Dr. Day. And then we'll move right to the last
Dr.
mile.
Ronald Day, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself, please?
Sure. Again, my name is Ronald Day. I'm a Vice President of Programs and Research here at the Fortune Society. I've been here for 7 years. I provide executive oversight for much of our jail-based services, as well as some of the services that we're offering in prisons, and for the wraparound services that we offer in the community. And we started a research center not long ago, maybe about 3 or so months ago, called the Center for Research, Inquiry, and Social Justice, or CRISJ, where I'm basically helping to lead that initiative with my colleague, Michaela. So, really excited about the work that Fortune does. We've been around for nearly 55 years, offering services exclusively to people that are directly impacted. We offer the most comprehensive of services. Our services are local, but the work that we do has national implications, including our policy and research. So I'll stop there because otherwise, we can go on for a pretty long time here.
Absolutely. And I'll go to the last mile now. This is obviously for Sid and the team. Tell us a little bit about the last mile and what technology do you utilize to teach technical skills behind bars?
Awesome. Thank you for the question. I'll do my best to keep it short like Dr. Day did. So TLM is an in-prison boot camp. We have technical boot camps that teach both web development as well as audio and video engineering to incarcerated students in the 6 states across the United States. We also have a reentry program where we offer wraparound services and support for people who have gone through our program and then been released. Very high level nutshell, we're an in-prison boot camp and reentry services. To answer your question about specifically what technology we utilize to teach technical skills behind bars, I think I'd want to draw on 2 things. The first is, as you mentioned earlier, Andre, the prison environment is both incredibly restrictive in the sense that it's very difficult to implement any kind of technological solution for incarcerated people. And it's also quite extreme in the sense of just how comprehensive the lack of access to any technology is. And so we have these technical boot camps, and in addition to teaching the technical skills, we build in a lot of soft skills and digital literacy. So the program that we deploy into facilities is really an entire ecosystem that our students can use that resemble what people use outside of prison. Students come into our classroom, they log into their computers, and they access an entire suite of cloud-based services. They have messaging platforms, they have cloud-based file storage, they use our LMS, they watch videos, they push code up into code repositories, there's image repositories that they use. And so we create this environment where they can start to use workflows that they would see in a modern workplace. They start to use language and differentiate between how you talk on something like Slack and how you talk on something like a professional email. So really kind of using this comprehensive approach that you're going to teach you technical skills, but we're also going to prepare you for when you get out and you can hardly do anything without using technology. You can't pay for parking without using technology. You can't file your taxes without using technology. And so being ready and upping that digital literacy is something that we focus on. Kind
Absolutely.
of further to that point, sorry, one of our pillars at TLM is audacity, and we like to do things that push the boundaries. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we've done lately is at the end of last year, we launched a laptop program where we give laptops to our students that they can take out of the classroom and back to their housing units, which anyone who's familiar with the in prison space is something that isn't particularly common. And so again, kind of speaking to the idea that in order for people to have digital literacy, they need to experience technology in a whole bunch of different modalities. Mm-hmm. So our students also have the opportunity of, I'm working at work, so to speak, and then I take my laptop with me back to my housing unit, where then I interact with technology, but in a different space with a different mindset, and really a different set of skills.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I'll turn it to Sheena. I know she has the first question for Aedan. And And Sheena may have dropped
Oh,
off.
my apologies. I
No
think I was
worries.
on mute.
That's all right. I know you had the first question for Aedan.
Yes, Aedan Macdonald, what is the mission at the Justice Through Code?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody. Really privileged to be here today, especially with all these incredible panelists. At the core of what we're focused on in Justice Through Code is really to provide support in a pathway from tech skills learning, from kind of writing your first line of code to completing your first full stack web development project, as well as the professional skills that are really essential to succeed in the tech workplace. And in addition to that, really focusing on providing a pathway into high wage employment. I'd actually started the program after I returned home from prison, as was said earlier, and I was fortunate enough to have been accepted into Columbia University to finish my undergraduate degree. Kind of came home with this vision as if everything was going to be great, and applied to lots of jobs and couldn't get them. And I think so much of the workforce development programming for people coming home has a focus on low wage employment. And so we're really focused on how can we open up to other job opportunities and provide that foundational knowledge that people can use as a springboard to either pursue a career in software engineering, or just even use those technical skills in a more of an office setting or different careers.
No, absolutely. And I want to turn back to Leah, right? And again, so good to see you, Leah, as well as all of the panelists. And so one of the things, Leah, is, during one's incarceration, right, a person's time can be identified like using phases, as the term is used. And can you describe what the phases are? And like most individuals go through like 3 phases, or 3 processes rather. Can you describe the processes and your personal experience related to that time period?
I think you're right. I think there are like 3 different phases. I think the first phase is like the initial shock. And then the second phase is like really like deciding like, what are you going to do with your time? Because, we also have phrases in prison that says you either do the time or the time does you. So that's like that second phase. And then the third phase is saying, okay, I've worked on myself. Now, where do I go from here? Your mind starts altering, and you start thinking about transitioning, to the free world. So it's like it's really like 3 phases. And it's so funny you said 3 phases, because that's how they kind of categorize it in prison as well, through transitional phases when they have programming.
Absolutely, Leah. And I'll turn it to Sheena now. I know she had the questions for Dr. Day.
Oh, yes. So, Dr. Day, what is the Individualized Correctional Achievement Network ICAM program? Can you elaborate on that for us, please?
Absolutely. So ICAN is a program, a partnership that Fortune established with the New York City Department of Correction. There are other providers involved in this initiative as well, but we work with people that are currently incarcerated in New York City jails. Initially, this particular project was referred to as RIDE, the Rikers Island Discharge Enhancement Program. And it was a program that was provided exclusively to people who are sentenced on Rikers Island. But it has, in the last, maybe 5 to 7 years or so, kind of morphed into a program that's not just for people that are sentenced. The city decided, with suggestions from providers, that you don't just serve people who are sentenced in the facilities. You serve anybody who is interested in working with folks to try to alter their lives so that they can, live differently, not just when they come home, but while they're inside. So there are 3 primary objectives with this particular initiative. One is to reduce idleness. Anybody who's been in jail, and I was inside for 15 to 45 years, 15 years in prison and then 5 years on parole, there's a significant amount of idleness inside of these places. So one objective is to reduce idleness. Another one is to reduce violence and to reduce aggression. Because we know inside of facilities, particularly men's facilities, there's toxic masculinity. And there are always incidents that happen because, people are dealing with trauma. They're dealing with, family issues. They're dealing with their court cases. So, and the third thing is to increase the likelihood that when people get released, that they'll be able to thrive, all right, that they'll be able to be successful. So that's basically what the program does. And we have a variety of different staff that are in the facilities and in the community that work with those individuals. So, I mean, I can elaborate more later, but I think I'll stop there.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that too, Dr. Day. And this is turning to last mile again, and this is for Jason, right? What kind of technology do you utilize to teach technical skills behind bars? In addition to that question, right, what is your success rate? And give some examples of how participants have been successful.
Definitely, and I can touch on the technology, and then I'll kick it to Sid to answer the second half of that question.
Perfect.
When it comes to technology, we focus mainly on JavaScript inside, and it's like it's a year-long boot camp, how Sid has described it, and it's broken up into two segments, two courses where web development fundamentals, they learn front end, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, build some projects, and then on the second half, it's MERN Stack, where they learn Mongo, Express, React, and Node, and build full stack applications, different projects. Towards the end of the curriculum, we do open up the curriculum, and they get exposed to Python and TypeScript and other coding languages, other databases, other frameworks, and we ask them to not only self-lead themselves through the curriculum and learn something new, but also implement it in a existing project, and talk about the trade-offs. Now, when it comes to success rate, I'm gonna pass it to Sid to cover that.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, success is an interesting question and something that we come up against quite often. I think typically in this space, success about people coming home is often talked about with the metric recidivism. And I think in that respect, our success is pretty good. Out of our graduates, 0% of them have recidivated. But the larger question here is really that metric to TLM does not seem particularly appropriate. It doesn't seem particularly sincere when so many people are in prison because society failed them, because our education system failed them, because the school to prison pipeline failed them. To then have them come out of prison and to measure their success based on whether that system fails them again, I don't think that makes any sense. Recidivism to me feels like a success metric for our society, not a success metric for people coming out of prison. So one of the things that we are working on and trying to develop is a metric that will more sincerely convey what someone's success is. And that's looking at things like, can the person provide for themselves? Do they have a job that they enjoy? Do they have a career that they want? Are they involved in their community? Do they feel fulfilled in their lives? The same metrics for success that we would use for a population that isn't justice impacted. So our success rate is pretty good. Our employment numbers are waywards of 90% for people who have gone through our program. But I think the conversation about success is what we'd really need to look at and start to curb, because the recidivism piece, I think, is particularly challenging.
No, that's great too. And I know Sheena and I, as we think about we thought about this webinar and reflected on it. Sheena, my colleague, works in family services. I work on the advocacy side, and we both know how important technology is for our people and what they're experiencing going through different systems. And I know Sheena has a question for Aedan around like what the skills are being taught in the qualifications. Sheena?
Yes. So I know, like all of us here, something inspired us to do the work that we're doing. So my question for you would be, what inspired you to create the program?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as I had sort of briefly touched upon, after coming home, I really struggled to find employment. I also realized that my pathway ending up at Columbia and actually finding employment there was very unique, right? That's an incredible privilege. I also knew as a white male coming home, it's going to be easier for me to find a job than somebody who's not white, and really felt like it's so defeating that so much of the messaging, even from people that have been impacted by the system, is the best you can hope for, or you should be happy to take a job where there isn't much room for upward mobility. And I think on top of that, there's places including Columbia, where access is restricted, right? There's not a very large number of people that get to participate in educational programming there that really provides a gateway, right? If you have a degree or a certificate granted from some of these institutions, it really helps to open up doors. And so it's really focused on how can we extend those opportunities, but also why Columbia Business School? There's so many future business leaders that are going through Columbia Business School that are going to be CEOs of major corporations, that are going to make hiring decisions, right? And some of the main advisors in our program are actually MBA students. And they also, through the Tamer Center, which is one of the our partners on the program, also has an in-prison business education program. And so I think that this is really what needs to be done to shift perception, because we're fed all of these lies by the media, right? Of what people are like that are incarcerated, and this idea that people are inherently dangerous or evil or these other things, when it's really a matter, as others have pointed out, of systems failing people. There's no access to education, resources, and so many of the communities that are impacted by incarceration. And I think having that contact, people realize, wow, everything I thought about this system is not true. And it really motivates them to then see what they can do. And it's actually been interesting for us. Some of our best partnerships and hiring have actually come from MBA students that go on to companies, and they talk to their hiring managers and they say, hey, what can we do about this, right? Because it's something that becomes much more real and tangible when you have a somebody who you've become close with that's experienced the system.
And speaking of systems, right, and you're talking obviously, Aedan, on the back end, right? People are released now, they're accessing the training that you're offering, et cetera. I want to turn back to Leah. And, Leah, we talk about these phases, right? And when does phase 3 start for an individual scheduled to be released? That's the first question. And then, is this an adequate time to prepare for reentry? And if not, how much time do you think is sufficient and why?
Well, for some people, if somebody is sentenced to a determinate sentence, which is a flat bid, they usually go to phase 3 like 3 to 4 months prior to their release. If someone has already gone to, like, say, a parole board, and they make the board after the initial board, then they'll go to phase 3 30 days before their release. But honestly, I think that reentry, anything to do with reentry should be started at the entry. It shouldn't have a time frame to say, because everybody is different, everybody is unique, and people have unique, especially women. Women have very unique needs. Women are incarcerated and have a lot of trauma that's unaddressed prior to going to prison, and it's unaddressed in prison. So I think that the reentry has to start at entry.
No, I think that's a great point. And as you said, women have unique needs, the likes of which require different kind of interventions than men. And starting obviously before people are getting toward the end of their sentence, right, and of serving time in prison, is more important, right, or equally as important, right, in terms of reentry. And so I'm going to turn to my colleague, Sheena. I know Sheena had a question for Dr. Day.
Yes, I know, Dr. Day, that you elaborated on the ICAM program and what it entails. Can you tell us what type of pre and post-release services are offered through the program and how the services are being delivered?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we have staff that are referred to as group facilitators, as well as transitional coordinators and mentors that work with the population that is currently incarcerated, right? The group facilitators, they facilitate groups around a variety of different topics. So you basically name it, and we probably have groups that cover the topic, but some are anger management, we do relapse prevention, we do cognitive behavioral interventions like thinking for a change, we do trauma-informed care, we're doing like mental health first aid stuff. We also have our staff that are the transitional coordinators and mentors. They do what are called service plans, which are basically like needs assessments. And it's about determining what needs people have as they're in the facilities, as they are eventually going to be transitioning either home or upstate. So we're trying to help them work through those different issues. But I say one of the primary things that the staff do in the jails is talk to people and listen to the incarcerated population, because we think, oh, how big a deal is it to be incarcerated and to be there sometimes for a significant amount of time. One of the students that's in my class has been in jail for 6 years. She was in a juvenile facility for 3 years, and then now she's been on Rikers Island for 3 years. Can you imagine someone sitting in jail for 6 years without their case having been adjudicated yet? I mean, the person needs someone to help them work through these different issues. We also do what are called hard skills. So we do electrical, like carpentry and plumbing and scaffolding, solar panel installation. We do culinary stuff with them. So we're doing all of these types of hard skills in partnership with some of our sister agencies in order to help increase the chances that individuals will be able to secure viable and gainful employment once they are released from the facilities. So that's basically what we do with the population that's inside.
Thank you for that too, Dr. Day. And speaking about, it sounds like the ICAM obviously program is robust in its service offerings to the people that are detained there and preparing them for release. And I want to transition now to Sid, right, from the last mile, right, in terms of program expansion. Are there plans to expand your program to other states?
Short answer, absolutely. Expansion is always on our mind, and even with COVID kind of having slowed us down a little bit with how it affected the prison system, we stayed afloat and we kept our momentum and are actively expanding. I think we're both expanding into new facilities, new classrooms, new states, but we're also kind of expanding horizontally in the sense, and I think particularly relevant to this conversation, we're looking at new ways of introducing programming for people to hopefully be as equitable as possible, right? So we're looking at shorter programs that we can offer to people who are closer to release to get into some facilities that maybe don't have people with quite as much time left on their sentence, so that we can look at things like financial literacy, digital literacy, and kind of more bite-sized programs that we can offer to people at a larger scale than what we're at now.
Yeah, sure. And Sheena, I'll turn it to Sheena for a question for Aedan.
Yes, so I know you shared the inspiration. Now, what technical skills are being taught to the participants? Also, what qualifications do the participants need to be enrolled in the Justice Through Code?
Yeah, that answer is actually something that will change for our next cohort, because we're kind of separating out into two programs. We had initially started really with the intention of being a gateway program, right? So, the states where the last mile exists, it's an incredible resource, right, for people before they're coming home. Not a resource that exists in many areas, including in New York State. And so we were really looking just how do we support providing that exposure and really then supporting on-ramps to additional programming or apprenticeships. We're actually switching to a model now where we'll have a digital literacy focused training that teaches some very basic web development that culminates in a project that's actually then used for admission into our core program, which would be more advanced than it currently is and a little bit more accelerated. To enter into that digital literacy, still need enough familiarity with the computer to navigate applying to the program, right? There's a Google form that you access that through, and generally I would say kind of familiarity with email and navigating the computer user interface. And then in terms of the tech that we teach Python, Django, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in the core program. And in the intro program, we'll be focusing more kind of on basic web development fundamentals.
Yeah, thank you for that, Aedan. And turning to you, Leah, when we're thinking about the digital divide, we're thinking about making sure that people are empowered with the kind of digital literacy that they need. Like, what do you think is missing from the process from corrections, supervision, right, to community reentry that most individuals can benefit from, like immediately upon their release? I think we all know the answer, hence the reason why we're on this panel, right? And we had this discussion, right? We know it's digital literacy. But more specifically, Leah, why do you believe digital literacy is essential to phase 3, and how do you envision the training?
I think that because the whole purpose of their quote unquote rehabilitation model is for people to come out better than they were when they went in. So, you know, for returning citizen, you have to equip them with the signs of the times. Like, you can't be antiquated, and technology is like, society is moving forward. I did 22 years in prison. It was no social media when I went to prison. They didn't equip me for what I was going to face when I came out, you know? So, I mean, so speaking from experience, and, you know, the correctional facilities have to start they have to start going off of, come from fear and go off of fact. Because when it comes to fact, education, whether it's academic, whether it's technological, education is the only program that reduces recidivism. So that's what they need to look at. They need to really put that emphasis on that. And they need to, you know what I mean, they need to really put the digital technology inside of the facility so that people are equipped for when they do transition. Because if you don't set people up to succeed, what's going to happen? They're going to fail.
And Sheena, I'm sure you're excited about that answer too, right? Just
Yes.
so powerful and resonates with us. And I'll turn it to you, Sheena. I know you have a question for Dr. Day.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Day, for sharing the program overseas. I know with every program, there are the successes and the challenges. Can you share some of the successes and challenges that are faced through the relation to supporting digital services needs for participation?
Yeah, I mean, since we're among friends, we can be frank, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's difficult, honestly, to support the digital literacy services of people when they're basically living in the Stone Ages in our facilities. I mean, that's just the reality. I'm super excited to hear what Sydney and Jason are doing by giving people laptops in the facilities that they can actually take to their cells. I mean, that's unheard of. You know, the most that they have right now going on in our jails and prisons, Sheena, is a tablet, right? With very limited capacity and also antiquated computers.
Yep.
So we need greater receptivity among our corrections officials and our policy makers, right? We all need to come to terms with this reality. You need to have some core fundamental computer skills if you're going to be successful when you make the transition. We're paying our bills through these devices. We're applying for jobs through devices. We're clocking in and out of work through these devices. We're requesting time off. We're accessing our medical records. We are accessing our children's school records. The more we know about technology, the better off we're going to be. And frankly, through our policy center and through some collaboration with our colleagues in New York and around the country, we really have to push these correction officials and members of the legislature to allow for us to get out of the Stone Ages and to allow people to use technology. We have the ability for people to use it without fear that they're going to be online doing something they're not supposed to be doing, like trying to escape or I mean, people just want to put themselves in a position, as Leah said, you do 22 years, I did 15 years. You want to come out at least ready for what you're going to face. Now, that's me on my soapbox. For successes, we are working with corrections partners, right? Who have been receptive to a certain extent, like Sydney has already said, right? Some of our folks and some of the folks that we work with in the facilities, when we talk about successes, they're coming to our agency and they're actually enrolling in our programs. They're getting the Microsoft Office, Google trainings, and a lot of other trainings that are really putting them in a position where they will be able to do extraordinarily well in the community. But we need to start inside. And so, I mean, that's my thought about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a really important thought. And thank you for that, Dr. Day. As we know that ultimately, while people are getting the training that's needed to prepare them for release, the goal is that they are hired and employed, right, and earning a livable wage. And the pathway to that is accessing training in the digital field. And so speaking of that, right, because when we're talking about making sure people are hired and thinking about the legislature, as you spoke about, Ronald, and policy, right, Jason, this is for you, right, in the last mile's work. Why is fair chance hiring important? And how can others advocate for fair chance hiring?
Thank you for that question. So fair chance hiring is really important because one, acknowledge some folks didn't have a first chance in the first place, right? And so that's why we don't use second chance hiring. Two, on a basic human level, everyone should have the opportunity to take care of themselves, their family, their community. And by allowing fair chance talent inside of your org, you're acknowledging that person as a human being. Third, you would get a driven and resilient employee that wants to contribute to society. So it's very important that you give them the opportunity to start to contribute. And then lastly, it can save lives. I know for myself, growing up being system impacted at 8 years old in the foster care system and eventually getting justice involved and growing up in prison, I knew one life with two outcomes, which was prison or death. And it literally saved my life because it gave me a different alternative. It gave me a community of support, which is one of our pillars. And it also gave me a different outlook on life, right? It disrupted my way of thinking and everything else. So one thing I really want people to understand and take away is that when passion and creativity isn't guided or isn't given opportunities, it can easily turn into criminality. Now, when it comes to how can you advocate and get involved when it comes to fair chance hiring, that's a way bigger conversation. It's a lot of things I can say, but I'd rather just point you to info@thelastmile.org and have you come be part of our workshops that we do with different tech companies in the industry, different companies in the entertainment industry, when it comes to looking at policies, looking at barriers, looking at job description, looking at recruitment processes, and really understand what fair chance opportunities mean in an equitable way.
Yeah, thank you for that too. And you know, it's really important, right, that we continue to remain in action with making sure that the fair chance for hiring legislation remains in place and that it's enforced. Because it's one thing to be on the books and codified, but the other thing to be enforced. So that's a really great point that you raised, Jason, and thank you. And I'll turn it to Sheena.
Yes, Aedan Macdonald, we know that partnership is very important, and you have a partnership with Amazon Web Services. Can you share some details on your partnership with Amazon Web Services?
Yeah, happy to. I think both in the context of Amazon Web Services and other companies that we've worked with for Amazon and some other companies, including Google, they're funders of our program, but they're really more than that, right? They're partners to support us in the process of fair chance hiring, right? Getting employment for our students, as well as, I think most importantly, is the mentorship that they provide. So we run a 3-month technical mentorship program that comes at the very end of our regularly scheduled classes, where students work together with software engineers, usually mid to senior in their career, for at least 2 hours a week over 3 months to really get some experience of, okay, we learned everything in this classroom, but how is this actually applied in the real industry? And to also think about different questions that people have as they're entering into those careers. I think we've talked a lot today, right, about lack of access to quality education and under-resourced neighborhoods. I think one of the huge things that is also overlooked is just networks, right? It's like, who do you ask about applying to a job? Who do you know that works at a tech company? And I think one of the things that our students report most often is that it's that relationship that's kind of the point at which they switch and they say, I could see myself in this space, right? Like, I built this relationship, I'm conversant with this individual. And I think that is, from a kind of corporate partnership perspective, so important, especially as Jason's talking about in the fair chance hiring, right? I think that's, it's really also employees that can drive these things forward. Employees hold a lot more power within companies than I think they're given credit for. And if a dedicated group of employees comes in and says they want their company to do something, they're probably going to get some movement. So definitely, yeah, appreciate that question there.
And transitioning now to Leah, Leah, you came home, you obviously become a powerful leader in the criminal legal reform advocacy space. And you engage elected officials regularly, right, to advance policies and legislations that positively impact the lives of people that have been impacted by the criminal legal system. You know, if you had the opportunity, Leah, to speak to an elected official, for example, how would you advocate for digital literacy training behind bars?
Well, first and foremost, I'm going to hold them accountable. You know, they're always talking about the rise in crime. They're always talking about safer communities. But guess what? If you don't invest in the communities and you don't invest in people, that's not going to happen. You know, so we have to hold them accountable for the things that they say, you know, and we have to also educate them. We have to, you know, utilize amazing programs like Last Mile, you know, bring it to this coast, you know, and with Justice Through Codes, and let them realize that they have to go with the signs of the time. Like, you can't stay antiquated and expect people to be a success. You can't set people up for failure. You have to set them up to succeed. And then that way it's like a pay it forward thing, you know, that you empower people, then they come out and they empower their communities. And then that way we can have safer communities, and we can have people, you know, not reoffending, going back to prison, and people being successful.
Sheena?
Yes, Dr. Day, how can we increase the educational surrounding digital literacy embedded in pre-release services?
I mean, I know me and a lot of the people that I work with and a lot of the folks that I serve time with are kinesthetic learners. In order to be able to learn something, you have to be able to do it. So you need engagement with the devices, you need engagement with the technology. As Sydney said earlier, you know, we experience technology in different modalities. You can't think that you just give me a book and tell me to read about technology and that I'm gonna learn about technology through that. You have to actually show me. It's almost like a child. You show me what you want me to do, and then let me practice it so that I could become proficient in it. Otherwise, until we actually do that, until we allow for that type of access in the facilities, I just think that it's not really going to happen. We just have to be realistic with ourselves. As long as there's no access to computers, then, and or like at least limited access to like the internet and to sources where people can get information and they can, you know, learn about technology, they can then become much more competent in digital literacy. So, you know, I offer that as a pathway. We really have to get our corrections officials and the policymakers who are in the positions to make these decisions away from the notion that computers and computer access is like giving people the key to the front gate. I mean, we have enough knowledge, we have enough resources. If we could send a person to the moon, we can certainly send in some computers to our prisons for people to be able to learn digital technology and digital literacy without fearing that there's going to be a riot or something that's going to happen because people have this limited access. So to me, that's just the direction that we need to go in. I don't really see it happening any other way, frankly.
And thank you for that too, Dr. Day. And, you know, at Fortune, we have our digital equity programming, and that's really important, significant for people coming home to be able to access. But to your point, right, about technology, you know, Dr. Day, we have satellites and others, right, in 7 miles above us in the sky, and we can see the head of a penny on the ground from 7 miles up. And yet we cannot figure out ways by which we can get people to access technology to empower them in a safe kind of way. And so I want to transition now to back to Jason and Sid, whom I know, you know, each of you engage government officials and folk who are working in the private sector. And what's one thing you want leadership in those organizations to understand about the last mile?
Thank you. I really love the energy right now with that Leah and Dr. Ronald Day kind of kicked off, and I kind of want to double click on that. It's really lean into innovation, right? This space really needed to be innovated. It was built on old ideas, and it needs to be innovated, right? people are not going to be able to get the services, not be able to be set up for success if you don't lean into innovation. One of the reasons why we were able to continue to run our program during COVID was because we leveraged technology. And if you look at even in society, the businesses that struggle was the ones that didn't know how to leverage technology. And the other thing I want leaders in that space, from the government officials or in the private sector, to understand is that half of our staff, we're close to about 40 employees, half of our staff come from our program, right? And that really speaks to some of our pillars of community, learning, sincerity. And when I talk about learning and sincerity, we're learning from their lived experience. If we're giving them a community to come home to and feel to start their healing process, because it is definitely a healing process that come home. You have another side of reentry, mental and emotional, that you need to work on. And then when it comes to sincerity, that starts with language. How you address these folks, how do you talk to them? What labels do you put on them? Are you constantly using dehumanizing language like parolee, inmate, convict? We don't do that. And we ask our partners not to do that also, right?
If I could build on that too, sorry, Andre,
Sure,
quick.
double click, please.
I think one thing that I would want our partners and not our partners, but if we're talking about leadership, I would want everyone to understand, and this is building, Dr. Dan, what you were saying, is that we need to stop the narrative of why don't people who come out of prison try harder to get jobs? Why don't they improve better to get jobs? I want people to understand that the responsibility is on us as a society, because what we have done to these people is broken. So if you look at your organization and you don't have anyone who is hired who is justice impacted, you cannot think, that's because no one who's justice impacted is good enough to work at my company. They need to get the skills and then I'll hire them. That is the complete wrong attitude. And I think we need to not be afraid to really look and learn about what we haven't done correctly in the past. What mistakes have we made in the past, and what mistakes maybe we're still making today, and not be afraid to ask ourselves, how do we improve the systems we have so that people have those equitable opportunities to things like education and things like technology?
Absolutely. And I'll turn it to Sheena. And we do have a few questions in the chat, and we're going to get to those questions following the conclusion of the questions to our panelists. So stand by, those who have raised your questions. Sheena?
Yes, Aedan, I know the main objective is for every participant to be successful after completing the program. Life after justice through code, can you share some success stories? I did see that you, on your LinkedIn page, there was an 80% success rate. Could you share a little bit about that with us, please?
Yeah, happy to. I think helpful to maybe share like individual success story, and then we can talk more broadly. Thinking out of our first cohort, which I think we like incredibly fortunate to have had these outcomes at that time, because we were really just scrappy little program trying to get things running, and started to provide access to these resources. Somebody who I now consider one of my closest friends is actually our instructor in the program. And he's also working as an associate software engineer at a nonprofit in New York called Emergent Works. Yeah, I think it's, it's interesting. I think somebody had asked a question in terms of, can people apply to the program after they've been home for a long time? And this individual, he'd actually been home for over 10 years and had not had a long-term employment during that time period, because it was just so difficult to get a job besides low-wage jobs that they didn't provide much stability, right? And now we're looking at, and both for him and many of our other participants that are now at companies like Amazon, or usually focusing on kind of mid-size startups and above. I think smaller companies can be a little bit harder for students to enter into, just because there's so much change happening in those companies, and there's a little bit more resources at the larger ones to kind of help in the onboarding process. But I think the having access to those increases in earnings, but especially things like healthcare, 401k, just the stability that comes from that is so important, and really is something that has been excluded to the communities impacted by incarceration. And I actually, if it's all right, would love to touch upon also what Jason and Sydney were responding to in terms of other kind of organizations. I think that one of the things that, we've seen after the killing of George Floyd is a lot of companies come out and say, we want to respond to systemic racism without the in-depth understanding of what does that mean, right? If you look at lifetime likelihood of incarceration for Black males in this country is 1 in 3, right? For me as a white male, it's 1 in 14. And so I think I would just urge so many of these companies and organizations to really take a better understanding of why is the system in the current state that it is, as an extension of the legacy of slavery and segregation, and really begin to make a commitment, because there's no way that we get out of the situation that we are in our society without focusing on fair chance hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that too, Aedan. And Leah, your advocacy work, while focused in large measure on people generally who have been impacted by the criminal legal system, you also have a specific focus on women. How can digital literacy benefit women, right? Not just by employment in and of itself upon their release, but also how can digital literacy benefit women while incarcerated and even upon release?
I think for one, digital literacy can help empower women. A lot of times, even having access to certain resources, that can help. Just being able to navigate, because when you look at it, the women are the pillars of the community, whether they're in prison or whether they're in society. So they are the mothers, their sisters, the daughters. So they have a lot that they carry on their shoulders, and having that digital literacy can really, like I always say, can armor them with the tools that they need to just be successful, and it takes away from them being so re-traumatized in an environment that, that constantly traumatizes people anyway, so it empowers women. And it's something that I wish that I had when I was incarcerated, instead of, like Dr. Ronald said, having computers that were just like typewriters, so it can definitely, be a benefit, even in the smallest fraction of it being inside the institution, to help people, because it's needed. You can't stay antiquated, can't stay in the Stone Ages forever. They have to really move forward with times.
And that's really, really important. And, I served 16 years of my life incarcerated, and I know the value and benefit of using computers. And Dr. Day and I had become beneficiaries of a program that we had been a part of called the National Trust for the Development of African American Men. And the founder of that organization, who we speak of posthumously, is Dr. Gary Mendez. And he had supported us with getting access to computers. And we had developed a computer lab with Powerful and so many others who were part of that group of men, and had offered computer literacy within the prison, the first of its kind in the entire state. Am I correct, Dr. Dave? That's my recollection serves me right. And I knew the value of that. And many of us localized ourselves within the prison at Greenhaven at the time to become administrators, and we continued to work on computers. Not everyone had access to that, but we knew the value of it, right? And we know the value of that generally when people in prisons and jails throughout the nation have access to technology. I want to turn it to Sheena for a question for Dr. Day.
Oh, Andre, can I say one thing real quick?
Sure, absolutely.
I just want to say, and you made a perfect example. You guys, the men's facility had digital literacy. The women are always overlooked. And having that digital literacy in the female institution will say, listen, we got a seat at the table now, and that's what's needed, because a lot of time, for far too long, women have been overlooked and have been an afterthought. So, and it's just, the proof is in the pudding. So, it's time that we have that seat at the table, and we do. So now it's like really make it work for us. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you for flagging that, Leah. And it's absolutely true, right? Men have actually been able to access resources and, by extension, power historically, right? Not only just in prison, just societally and internationally, right, than women. And it is time, and it has been time, right, for far too long for women to assume that leadership and to demand, right, the things they need for themselves. So thank you for raising that, Leah, flagging it. And I'll turn it to Sheena.
Yes. Dr. Day, you currently provide instruction to participants who are currently incarcerated. Can you share more about the program and how technology plays a role in course and how services are delivered?
Well, I'm doing that through the Justice and Education Program. So teaching a course in the jails and Rikers, as well as I'm teaching a course, the same course in the New York State prison, right? A women's prison. So the interesting thing is that I would say using a computer would be hugely beneficial. There's no question about that, right? Having access to a computer, right? The issue is, and Sydney elaborated on this as well, what we can do and what we have the appetite for are starkly different. We could do this if we wanted to. Just like Andre said, we can see from 7 miles up, but we just have not done this. But interestingly enough, the class on Rikers, they are using the tablet. We can actually share content with the students, right, through the tablet. We can upload videos to the tablet for them to watch and other content that relates to the class. So when I was in my class last night, and interestingly enough, in the state, and we talked about this, and I was like, well, what do you have the access to do with your tablets? And they were like, basically not much. So there's no capacity whatsoever to be able to do something in a state facility that we're actually doing with people in the jail. So there needs to be some kind of consistency around what we are doing. When we determine that something could work, like the last mile is sharing laptops with people, if that's something that we can determine works, then why is it that we're not able to replicate that, not just in other cities, but in other states? So, but right now, the most that we are doing in the city jails is uploading content to the participants or to the students so they can see that content. So there is some access. But again, it's not necessarily about making them more digitally aware. It's just about sharing content with them. But they're not like increasing to a large extent their capacity to know how to utilize these devices for what their needs will be when they make the transition. So that's just not the reality. And again, on the state side, there's with the exception of issuing the tablets, and to a certain extent, again, just trying to be frank, is that like using them to pacify people, because you watch videos, you can listen to music on your tablets and stuff like that. Just want to be honest, because that is what some of the folks have told me is happening. It's like people are like, oh, well, you know, you punished if you don't have your tablet. Whereas back in the days when I was inside, you didn't have a tablet, and they were only just introducing televisions into the side. And I was like, I don't want a TV because I'm not trying to sit up here and watch television. I'm trying to read a book, and I'm trying to think about what my transition is going to be like. I'm not trying to be glued to a television set worrying about watching all my children or something like that. So I'll leave it at that.
Absolutely. And newsflash, everyone, and our dear colleague Lily Shapiro just shared with us, and Leah, I'm sure you'll be happy about this, as well as Sheena and others, that Ketanji Brown Jackson was just confirmed as the first Black woman to be a Supreme Court justice. She is also the first former public defender and first justice since the late, great Justice Thurgood Marshall to have represented people in significant number of criminal cases to join the court. Just want to give you that news flash. And now I'll turn.
Sheena, we getting our seat. We got our seat, girl.
Right. So just want to share that as a news flash, and thank you for that, Lily. And so turning to, as we're moving toward time here to some degree, but we're going to get to these questions. This is for Jason or Sid. How does the last mile support returning citizens of the TLM program after release?
Sure, I can take this one at the beginning, and then Jason, feel free to add anything if I miss. So I think in terms of, with the TLM has a reentry department, and in terms of boots on the ground work, we do a lot. We do professional development workshops, we do mock interviews, we do continued education, focus on learning and digital skills training, as well as job placement services. So we kind of look at the whole wraparound comprehensive picture for whatever people in our community would need. But I think that we also issue equipment such as laptops and help people with emergency support and connectivity. But I think all of those tangible kind of physical goods are all well and good, but something that we really focus on is the creation of community. our program started here in California, more specifically in San Quentin State Prison, right here around San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And as people would get out and come back into the community, they would be proximate to tech, they'd be proximate to tech companies, they could go in person to interviews. And as we started to expand across the country, you know, people getting out in Oklahoma, people getting out in Michigan or in Indiana aren't necessarily as geographically proximate to those opportunities. And so I think that what we focus on doing in the reentry space that sets us a bit apart is the creation of a community of empathetic, omnipresent, and understanding like-minded individuals. I don't care whether you are in the heart of San Francisco or in rural Michigan. I don't care whether it's the middle of the workday or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I don't care whether you need help figuring out how to file your taxes or whether you need emergency support because you don't have somewhere to sleep tonight. You hit up the last mile and there will be someone to pick up the phone and to talk to you, because some of the feedback, frankly, that we have gotten from a lot of people coming home, especially outside of large metropolitan areas, is I don't have anybody that I can rely on to talk to about those things. I don't have anybody necessarily that I know is going to be there to understand what I'm going through and to give me the support that I need. And so that consistent presence and equitable opportunity to access that community of people who sincerely care about the situation that you're in and are invested in your success, I think that that's really how we measure our success as a reentry department.
And I'll take Jason. I know you had a comment too. Then we're going to turn it to Sheena for our final question, and then ultimately transition to the questions that are in the chat coming from the audience.
Most definitely, thank you. I think Sid spoke to something really important that our folks in our community see every day. And I think how I want to answer this and how we support as an organization is the things that they don't see every day, right? And specifically in my department in partnerships, when I'm engaging in conversations with some leaderships at different companies. And what I found is our no is just as important as our yes, if not more important. And we have had companies come in like, well, we only want to hire nonviolent. Well, that doesn't work for us. This is a non-negotiable, right? We really lean into equity and having equitable opportunities for people. So that's just not going to work, right? And then also like creating alternative pathways for some folks. I know it speaks to one of the questions in the chat where it's not just software engineering jobs that we're looking at now. We're looking at tech sales. We're looking at tech adjacent roles also, because some people don't get the opportunity to graduate from our program inside because they have got a time cut and everything else. And we're not going to tell you to stay inside longer to complete our program. No, come home. You got a community waiting for you. Come home. We're going to support you. We're going to get you on a pathway that aligns your interests, your strength, and your values.
Thank you for that too, Jason. And I'm going to turn it to Sheena. I know, Sheena, you like myself, we're excited and just really inspired by this conversation. Really and powerful. Now I'll turn it to you for the last question before we get to our Q&A in the chat.
Yes, Aedan, I know that you shared a lot of success stories. Can you share with us some employment opportunities that participants have obtained after completing your program?
Yeah, happy to. I think I touched kind of on the software engineering end, but kind of building off of what Jason's saying as well. I think there needs to be all opportunities open to people, right? And so I think one of the interesting things that we've seen, because our program is not as long, right, as the last mile, and we understand kind of the way the program was designed with the reality that like people can't go take 4 months off to go do a program that there's no stipend for. It's like how, and this is the solution for in many places, right? Do this program that you're going to learn everything, and who can afford to do that, right? After they've come home. So we've seen people actually go into tech recruiting. I have a couple people from our last cohort, also tech sales. A couple of people who just like utilized the course to move within companies into a role where they were maybe an admin assistant into a more tech focused role, and then as well as software engineering. Usually that's through longer term internships or apprenticeships. We actually have an apprenticeship program that people go through At Columbia, we have a IT department that's 400 people large. It's actually really a software development company because some of Columbia's technology that we use, including our student management system, is actually licensed out to hundreds of other educational institutions through the country. And so students have worked on that. And I think then finally, not quite employment, we'll actually have our first, a student from our first cohort who's graduating with their CS degree from Columbia here in May, which super excited about that one as well.
Now that's great. And thank you so much, panelists, for just really prioritizing this experience and being a part of this webinar and sharing your time and just sharing the power of your work and how meaningful it is to the people that are impacted by the criminal legal system that you serve. And so we're going to transition to the question. I know Sheila Solomon, who had asked a question around 2:35 p.m. That question was answered by a dear colleague and leader on this panel, or rather on this call itself, Adrian Whaley. But we're going to ask the question coming from Kelly Donahue at around 2:44. And hope you're still there, Kelly, patiently waiting for your answer. But your question was, because technology is always evolving, I'm curious how each organization is innovating their program for the future. And so any of you can take a quick shot at that, the answer. And I'll repeat the question again that Kelly Donahue had asked. I'm curious how each organization is innovating their programs for the future.
I can say something really quickly about that. So our Chief Technology Officer, Simon, is in this call here. We have been talking about how we need to offer a digital literacy course to our participants because we're doing job readiness training. They have access to all type of construction certifications. They have like Google, as I said earlier, and Microsoft, we have some training there. But we want to do something. We've been talking about setting something up specifically around IT. So excited. We are excited to work with Simon to see what we can actually produce because we have to walk the talk. We can't just talk about what is possible. We have to actually make it happen because it relates to, I think, what someone said earlier. I'm not sure if it was you, Andre. We really have to be innovative and we have to be entrepreneurial in how we do this. These ideas that we have, we can bring those ideas into fruition. We can get funders to back some of these initiatives. We are looking at labor market information to determine what jobs are currently available in this particular sector. And one thing I'd say is that in this particular space, and again, Sydney and Jason might have said this already, and maybe Aedan, there are very low barriers to entry because as long as you have these skills, you could have done some bad things, and as long as you can do this work, it's not like you don't have to go through some character and fitness and all the rest of this stuff like you're trying to become a lawyer or something. Here, they will give you an opportunity in very, very many instances, as long as you have the core skills to do the job.
Anyone else care to take it? Yeah, Sydney.
I'm happy to jump in on the last mile side. I mean, in innovation, we have an in-prison coding bootcamp where people access cloud resources. Clearly, innovation is somewhere in our model. And as I mentioned at the top of the call, a lot of that innovation is really kind of from a lens of audacity. I think when we started our program, one of the ideas that we pitched was, okay, we're going to have live video calls into our classrooms. 4 or 5 years ago, the idea that external organizations going to come to a prison and have video calls was no way, absolutely not. Take that a step further, which now we do have live video calls everywhere. Take that a step further. The people on the video calls are going to be people who are formerly incarcerated. Also hard stop, no. And a step even further after that are going to be currently on parole and have just recently been released from the classroom that they're calling into. And at the time, on the DOC side, it was like minds were exploding because there's no way in this reality that that's going to happen. And today, that's the status quo in all of our classrooms. Our remote instructors and the people who support our students via written correspondence are people who were in our program, or people who are actively on parole, actively on probation in the states that we're in. And so looking at more opportunities like that to continue to be audacious, we're talking about trying to bring connectivity for those laptops I was talking about earlier into housing units so that people can continue to access resources when COVID happens or when there's a lockdown or when there's a riot, so people can continue to be educated, even not in the classroom. We're talking about, Dr. Day, what you alluded to earlier, looking at cell phones. How can we bring handheld devices so that we can start to get people to actually be able to use the devices, not just read books about them? And then, as I mentioned earlier, looking at new curriculums and new opportunity to get learning in there, financial literacy. How can we help people get a bank account and a debit card prior to being released, so they're not released with $200 and they go to get a job and they said, okay, we can't direct deposit you because you don't have a bank account. You can't get a bank account because you have a driver's license. What type of more resources can we get and education for people while they're still inside?
And we're going to take another question that Sheena has. Before I do that, however, I have an announcement to make. And then unfortunately, it's not that I'm going to give everyone that's still participating as a viewer on this webinar free laptops, although we would love to do that if we could. But we had obviously an announcement, and we're going to announce it again at the very, very end. But the Fortune Society will be hosting this next hybrid event on Wednesday, April 27th. It'll be Fortune's first tech fair. So please be sure to subscribe to our newsletter to learn more. So I'll mention that one time again. Fortune is having its first ever tech fair when we talk about innovation, right? And it'll be on April 27th. And we'll get that to you, information to you a little bit later on. So turning to the next question, Sheena.
Yes, this last question is for Aedan, Sidney, and Jason. What are other gainful opportunities in terms of tech-centric career pathways except software development?
Yeah, I could jump into that. I think some of them are listed: UX UI design, project management, QA testers. Like I said earlier, tech sales is one of them that we're setting up right now through a three-way partnership. So it is a lot of different. Just what I tell our students all the time is that we're not just setting you up to have a career as a software developer. We're setting you up to have a career in tech, right? And that's totally different. You may get out and not want to be a software developer, but you might want to work in tech because it does pay well. Right, so it is different pathways that we have set up. And then going back, speaking to the last question, I think one thing that I would definitely love to lift up, because it really was born out of the sincerity of our leadership, is that when we think about innovating for the future, we actually we launched a couple years ago a scholarship foundation for the children of our graduates of our classroom, whether they're inside or out, are able to apply for a scholarship for their child for secondary education. And that, when I say sincerity, because they really understand and they have learned in this space that when one person is impacted, it's not just that one person impacted by the incarceration, it's their family also, right? And just because one person don't come back to incarceration doesn't keep the next person on that family tree from going into incarceration.
Any other thoughts on that? Aedan?
Yeah, I can add, definitely kind of seconding everything that Jason said, and as well as in the question. I think we're actually piloting a data analytics course right now as well. And this kind of touches upon the innovating. One of the things that funders always want to hear, and especially people in the tech space, is 10x, right? They want to know how we're going to reach scale, how we're going to work with so many people. And so kind of what we're doing in this course is really actually having it learner-led and a combination between asynchronous and live sessions, and really actually learning on the leaning on the learner community to decide what they want. So we actually have a survey that goes out every week for people to adjust the time, how often we have office hours, all these different things. And so I think really they're like meeting learners where they're at, because when you come home, it's like, I know right now I'm still on probation. If I get a call, right, I have to go there, and that can throw off my whole day, right? And so I think doing that, and then as well, I would just say a lot of what we talk about with our students is people hear tech and they think software engineering, but if you go into any major tech company, that's a small percentage of the overall employees, right? There's sales, there's operations, there's marketing, there's all these different things. And so I think it's really, this is just the beginning, right? We're at the very kind of early stages of opening up to all these different career opportunities.
Yeah, thank you for that too, Aedan. And then we're going to wrap up with some closing comments from each of you. And again, we really thank you for joining this panel as leaders and experts in the field. And I had a question in the chat from our Chief Technology Officer, Simon, who's really excited about this and happy that this is being put together, and your feedback and thoughts that you're sharing. And this was for Sydney relative to, are you guys incubating or training? Not that anything is wrong with either, just asking.
That's an interesting question. So if you ask our mission statement, I assume this question is about our students, the students in our program. If you ask our mission statement, I would say we're providing opportunities. And I think one of the things, one of our kind of core values, thinking about being sincere about who we serve and what we do, it's about rehumanizing people who have been systemically have been attempted to be dehumanized, and kind of giving the agency back to people who've had their voices taken away. And so the way we approach it is we provide opportunities, and it's this mutual symbiotic relationship of, we're going to come to the table and we're going to meet you as students at the table, and we're going to sit here as equals, and we bring the opportunity, you bring the passion, the drive, the resilience, all of those just remarkable qualities that you have from your lived experience, and together we're going to create that future for you, is really the way that I would describe it.
And we're going to turn now to just closing thoughts and reflections from each of you. And obviously we started off first with her, and we're going to end this, right, with her answering first. And so, Leah, turning to you, just some closing thoughts. Again, a really robust conversation around technology, around the digital divide, the importance of people being empowered, the need for opportunities to be created upon people's release, and making sure people are treated with equity and dignity and humanity, which has all been like themes throughout this conversation. So Leah, just some closing thoughts.
Definitely digital literacy is necessary. It's not even an option. And I just want to remain optimistic. I hope that the powers that be are in the ears of the people that can make it happen, because it has to happen. People are still unfortunately being incarcerated, and you cannot, I keep saying it, we cannot set people up to fail. We have to set people up to succeed. And, I am so grateful to be on this panel today with such amazing talent. Like, it's just like the knowledge, the power that's here. And I just think that I hope a lot of people were listening and just tuned in. And, it's like my mentor and my boss, Sharon, says, it's each one, reach one, each one, teach one. And, we just gotta make it happen. We gotta keep going. We gotta keep fighting until we get it done.
Absolutely. Now turn it to Sheena.
Are there any final remarks from any of the panelists?
Don't all speak up at once.
Yeah, I'll go. I want to echo what Leah said. There's power in unity. There's 51 of us who've joined this particular webinar, and I think we all, agree that we need to move the needle in this particular space. So this is a part of that process, a part of the conversation, and we're willing at Fortune to do what we can. So I love to have a separate conversation with Sydney and Jason. We have some colleagues in some other jurisdictions that are interested in programming in another state. We have a project with JP Morgan Chase where we are working on helping to develop an inclusive and equitable workforce ecosystem in the city of Philadelphia, especially for jobs in IT. So it'd be good to have a conversation with you about that. So yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to be a part of this. And as I said earlier, we have to walk the talk. So I'm gonna, after this, continue to talk with Simon and the rest of our colleagues about what we can do to continue to further push the needle for the individuals that we serve in the jails and in the prisons, so they'll be able to get access to some of these dynamic opportunities. So thank you all for being a part of the audience. And it was a pleasure to be on the panel with some dynamic folks.
Yeah, I would agree. It's been fantastic being here. I'm really grateful for the opportunity and for all the panelists and everyone attended. And Dr. Day, we'd love to have those conversations and connect. I think my final thoughts is really to also, Dr. Day, echo something that you said. I think if anyone listening here is going to take one thing away, take away that access. Without increasing access, we will not be able to solve the problem of the digital divide. And if we're gonna start somewhere, let's start to talk about how we increase the access. Everything else can come from that.
I would also just say thank you to everybody that participated, panelists, the privilege to kind of answer questions with all of you, as well as everybody that showed up as an audience member. I think I would also just add that it's so incredible to be in this virtual space, right, with people that are also committed to this work. And I think one of the things that I find whenever I'm on a panel is that I get so kind of laser focused on the work that we're doing within our own organization that I don't take enough time to reach out to other organizations and for us to really build together. And so I think both for everybody here, participants, I think this is such a big problem that we can all really push forward together, and excited about the possibility of collaboration there and the impact that we're able to have.
Yeah, and I echo what everyone said. It's such an honor to be able to share space with everyone here, and I would love for everyone to put how to get in contact with your organizations in there. I know if anybody in the audience is looking for information about fair chance hiring opportunities and what that actually means, please reach out to us at info@thelastmile.org. I really appreciate this opportunity, and like I said again, it's an honor to share space with y'all.
Well, unfortunately, we have to bring this to a close, but it's not stopping in terms of the actions following this, right? It's just this part of what we're doing is coming to a close. And I really want to acknowledge the brain people behind this webinar, and that's Carla Denole and Adrian Whaley, each of whom are responsible for the creation of this webinar and amplifying the need for our focus in this area as an organization. So I just want to acknowledge them, in addition to the entire Policy Center collective leaders who also supported in acknowledging the need to make sure that this webinar happens and contributed in their own way. So just want to acknowledge them too. And I'm going to acknowledge my co-host and colleague, Sheena Danu. So Sheena, thank you.
Thank you.
And so we're excited and thankful for everyone that's attended. There's many comments that are in the chat, and we thank everyone for their comments in the chat and their feedback. And so we really appreciate that. And our call to action is simply this: continue to organize and to develop a unity of action among all of the people that you know, to amplify ensuring that people in prisons and jails have access to technology that will prepare them to live a life of contribution upon their release. That's the call to action. And we know all of you will be involved in that. Until we meet the next time, and that next time for some obviously will be at our tech fair that we're going to be having. As I mentioned earlier, right, there will be Fortune's first tech fair on Wednesday, April 27th. We'll be hosting it at our main service center in Long Island City, 2976 Northern Boulevard in Long Island City. That's on April 27th. Fortune will be having its first tech fair. So please be sure to subscribe to our newsletter to learn more. My name is Andre Ward, and I'm joined by, again, my dear colleague, who?
Sheena Dumais.
And we will see you all in the not too distant future. Be safe, stay well, and stay advocating. Talk soon.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.